Hello and welcome to this Meet the Artist. I'm Elizabeth Murton, and with Inna Allen, we create the visual arts at UH Arts, which is the arts and cultural programme for the University of Hertfordshire. We are joined here today by alumni and photographer Carl Bigmore to talk to us about his practice. And this interview is part of our digital alumni exhibition series, which is now on our website, including contemporary design crafts, illustration, photography and fine art, and lots of activities you can do online as well. So delighted to have you with us today, Carl. Thank you for joining us. If you look at Carl's website, you'll see a really interesting and varied career, including clients such as the Financial Times, Airbnb, and exhibiting throughout the world as well, Germany, Canada, amongst other places. So it'd be great to hear a little bit more about your practice and what inspires you.
Obviously a photographer and with a background more in documentary work. So I did a master's as well, subsequently after, well, not straight after, but as well as the BA, I have a master's in documentary photography. But my practice, whilst it's sort of influenced by documentary, it sort of straddles a documentary sensibility with maybe something more artistic or a fine art practice. And I only say that in the sense that I'm very much like interested in probing what it means, people's relationship with place and the environment and our connection to place and the world around us. And I don't want to necessarily reach at that in a literal sense. I'm very much sort of interested in mythologies, history of place, and how that weaves into our understanding. And I guess in a more sort of lofty sense, this sort of psychogeography of a place. So that's sort of, yeah, so I'm very much about, I usually will spend sort of sustained amount of time, go to places for, you know, especially when I travel for like a month, and really sort of immerse myself in the world of that place. And looking at like landscapes and people and making portraits, and then sort of looking at details and still lifes, which communicate something about that place to me. And often there's an overarching theme within my projects. A lot of the time they have like a ecological or environmental side to them. But yeah, that's sort of that's my general sort of personal practice. And then when I'm not doing that, it's commissions, like editorial commissions, portraits, etc. But also I do less glamorous stuff like event photography. You know, the things that make ends meet. So a little mixture of everything.
That's the great thing about being a photographer, is that it's a skill that can allow you to do those kind of more commercial things, and then also use that kind of skill to explore the questions you're interested in about place.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's nice that it has different applications. So it has very practical application, which you can, you know, as the creative, we need to make money somehow. And so you have those practical applications. If photography has its limitations as a vehicle for telling certain kind of narratives, but as a vehicle for expressing in sort of, you know, an image, a still image, when you bring them together in a set of images, they create a sort of, it's almost like poetry. You can bring images together and place them next to each other and create a sequence that pulls you into another sort of world. It creates its own world. And that's really what I'm sort of always reaching for, creating a set of images that brings you deeper into the experience of whatever it is I'm looking at. And these always, when you talk about them out loud, sound like quite lofty ideas, but I think there's a thing about place and about a connection to place that it's just so fascinating. And I think we intuitively experience place without sometimes realizing it. You know, we go certain places and we can feel a sort of heaviness and stuff, or we can feel like a lightness. And I mean, these sound like very sort of abstract kind of, you know, I might start chanting ideas, but what I mean by it is like, I think these are things we disconnect from, and I feel like photography is a really useful way of bringing that connection to light.
The two works that we have in the online exhibition are from a different time. They're when you were able to travel. I don't know if it's a series, but they're both diner workers, one in Trinity Boy Wharf in London and one in OK diner on the A1. And they're really, really poignant and fascinating. But I'd love to hear more about those works. I suppose, again, it's that idea of place and the people you found in them.
That's very much like about, you know, human activity and human cultures. And it's very simply, and actually what was nice about that project and was really sort of fulfilling for me was that I'd have traveled quite a bit beforehand to make work, but I really wanted to sort of give myself the task of making work in the UK. But obviously the project is essentially about American diners being in the UK and this sort of like American culture being transposed into the UK and Britain, and how that what that means in the sense of like our relationship with America and American culture. I mean, it's funny because obviously, you know, America is founded on European settlers, but at the same time, we now sort of have this exporting of American culture into, well, all over the world now. So that diner project, though, very simply was, I'd seen a few of these diners around, and I just really was fascinated by this sort of idea of you can walk through a door and be in a completely different sort of cultural space, in a very sort of pop culture-y way, you know. And I kind of love that stuff. I love the sort of lightness of it and the colors and, you know, all the nostalgia built into diners, the American diner, and what they are and what they sort of historically were used for. So yeah, the project, when I first sort of thought about it, it was literally driving, I think, on the A1, seeing the OK Diner and being a bit like, oh, you know, that would be kind of cool to create. It just came into my head very simply. And originally I always thought, oh, it'd be funny if you shot it all without revealing that it was the UK. So just sort of shooting all these portraits and landscapes of diners and wondering if people would notice it UK. So, but as the project went on, it sort of evolved, and I just was always clear about it being the UK. But yeah, just quite simplistic idea, really. But playing a lot with aesthetics, trying to capture a certain kind of light. So always going at a certain time of day when the you know, the light was coming in through the windows at a sort of lower angle, you know, so as the sun sets or something. So just sort of reaching for maybe like a West Coast American sunset vibe.
Next question is about really, so the reason we've done this opportunity to meet some of our graduates is to celebrate the skills and talents of the School of Creative Arts alumni, and you graduated from photography.
Digital and lens media. And
then you went on to do your MA in London.
Yeah. But I did that in 2014. So yeah, I had a gap. I went and worked for a good while and pursued photography as well. But I was working full time. So when you leave university on a BA course, you know, the road's long in front of you, and you have this expectation that I certainly did, that I'll graduate and then I've got to just quickly transition to being this professional photographer. But it's a lot more winding sort of path, I think, for a lot of people. And what I learned through that was just the persistence and being committed to something for the long haul.
And was there something you can share with us about what you learnt whilst doing your BA here at University of Hertfordshire that has helped you in your career?
Yeah, I mean, the whole 3-year experience of being immersed in being creative and pushing yourself to explore different ideas and different avenues, and allowing yourself to fail. I mean, I know that's quite a sort of often said phrase, but I mean, obviously you need to fulfill your assignments and things, but not being too disheartened if you're not getting a great grade in year one or in your second year, because I definitely made sort of projects that weren't that great, but I was sort of finding my feet. And I think my time at Hearts really just nurtured that ability to think creatively and to have ideas and follow ideas that may not necessarily work that well as a final outcome, but they allow you some growth in, you understand, oh, okay, so I'm not so good at that, or that wasn't really right for me. So you kind of find your way onto the things that, a way of working. I found a way of working that suited me, and to be honest, it's very much still in some ways the way I work now. Certainly sort of aesthetically, by the end of my course, I was using the same camera that I still use now. And not to get too hung up on technology or, your tools as a creative, but just it established a sort of creativity and a way of working for me. Being surrounded by both, lecturers, but also your colleague, your fellow students, and just being in that sort of bubble or tight-knit group where you can foster ideas.
That opportunity to try different ideas, do different projects, and then work out what you want to do, what your style is, what your own personal kind of practice is. You were talking about that kind of journey after you graduate, which is really, when you graduate, sometimes it's the beginning, isn't it, really, of the next stage. And I wonder if you have any tips that you'd like to share with new photographers or artists who are at the beginning of their journeys.
For me, it was about finding a way that was, I had the response, I had sort of the financial responsibilities fulfilled, but allowing time for the creative exploration, and also building your confidence, because I think when you graduate, you have this idea that you've done 3 years of a course and you should be ready. But for me anyway, it still took time for me to just build up to be like, oh, I can do a commission now and I'm comfortable doing that commission, or I can approach this magazine that I've always wanted to work for, or I can approach this publisher, who I'd like to have my work published with. That all takes time because you're still growing. And I think it's just allowing yourself, once you've graduated, that space to still be creative and still nurture that. And I think staying connected with, friends and kind of colleagues that you make on the course, that helps a lot. It really helped, I found, when I graduated, just even being in touch with my lecturers, afterwards, just to bounce, so you still have that, because you go from an environment that's very creative, and you can bounce ideas of people, to being out there in the world where it's nice to have that sort of base to come back to.
So that kind of peer support, I suppose, of your fellow, like you said, your fellow tutors and your fellow students, especially the students who've then graduated, you're in that journey together, aren't you?
It's also a different time now with social media, and there seems to be a lot of pressure to constantly be active. It was a bit of advice I was given later, more recently, was just allowing yourself a little bit of time away from those things, and just to have some sort of quiet moments where you're not feeling that pressure, and you can just be a bit more sort of generating ideas and be a bit more sort of creative thinking mode. For any students who are currently studying at Herts, then just embrace that time and enjoy it, because it's a time I look back really fondly on. Just to embrace that opportunity. There's a lot of things going on campus and also away from it, that you can really just dive into that sort of whole world of creativity, and to enjoy it.
Absolutely. And you have a website, so people can find out more about your practice.
Yeah.
On the website.
It's carlbigmore.co.uk. So that's Carl with a C. Bigmore is Bigmore.
Brilliant.
.co.uk. Yeah, and I'm on Instagram.
But that's great, so people can find out more, and of course people can see the photographs we talked about in our digital alumni exhibitions, which are on the UH Arts website, uharts.co.uk, and also follow us on social media as well, Uni Herts Arts.